Hi, I'm Andre. The claim I'm going to be responding to today is capital punishment is the most efficient way to deal with people who are a threat to society. My opponent's secondary claims were, one, that capital punishment keeps criminals from endangering any more people. Two, capital punishment also prevents people from wanting to commit crimes. And three, it is true that there's a risk of sentencing innocent people to the death penalty. However, it is a necessary risk. My response claim is the evidence given is insufficient to raise the conclusion that it is the most efficient way to deal with criminals. Okay, so my response to his first claim was, my opponent mentioned that in 2003, 3,374 prisoners were put under the sentence of death. While looking through the U.S. Bureau of Justice website, I found that of these 3,374 prisoners, only 65 were executed nationwide. In 2008, 37 inmates were executed, 5 fewer than in 2007, and 28 fewer than that of 2003. This leaves almost all of the inmates under death penalty in the prison population, which creates the possibility for more harm done to other prisoners. And yeah. So my response to the secondary claim too, which was capital punishment also prevents people from wanting to commit crimes. My opponent used the example of the Supreme Court case Furman versus Georgia. Due to this case, some states had to reevaluate their capital punishment policies. This statement gives off the feeling that the states completely abolished the capital punishment law. And then after looking for which states rewrote the laws on the Bureau of Justice website, I found that only 14 of the 50 states in the United States do not have or have never used capital punishment as a viable sentence. Only 4 of those 14 changed the capital punishment policies from the example that he gave. And those states that do not use capital punishment simply use life without parole as an alternative. My opponent's next point in that second claim was that the homicide rate increased to its highest level in the 20th century in 1980. This is a true fact. The homicide rate was 10.2 per every 100,000 people were victims of homicide. And this was estimated by experts from the Bureau of Justice to equal 23,404 homicides. Although the rate of 10.2 is the highest, the amount of homicides is not the highest. In the early 1990s, when rates were much lower and the population was higher, the number of homicides was still higher than that of 1980. In 1990, the rate was 9.4 of every 100,000, and the homicides were higher with 23,438. In 91, the rate was 9.8 per every 100,000, and the amount of homicides was 24,438, 1,000 homicides more. In 92, the rate was 9.3 per every 100,000, and the homicides were 23,760. And in 93, the rate was 9.5 for every 100,000, but the homicides were still higher at 24,536. And then a New York Times survey conducted by Raymond Bonner and Ford Fessenden titled Absence of Executions in 2000 demonstrated that the homicide rate in the states with capital punishment have been 48% to 101% higher than those without the death penalty. This shows pretty much that there is the link between capital punishment and less crime is not that strong, actually. And then my response to secondary claim 3, which was it is true that there's a risk of sentencing innocent people to the death penalty. However, it is a necessary risk. My opponent does not use any sort of viable statement to back his point. He says things such as, until we find something better in reference to the jury system, we have to deal with it. in my opinion, the risk is not only of killing innocent people, it is the cost of killing the people as well. He mentioned that at least 131 people have been exonerated from death row, which is true, but he failed to mention that this stat is from 1972. That means from 1972 to I think last year, only 131 people have been exonerated, including 22 from Florida alone. And as far as cost, it costs more to execute a person than to keep him or her in prison for life. Various state governments estimate that a single death penalty case from the point of arrest to execution ranges from $3 million to $7 million. And then cases resulting in life imprisonment average around $500,000 each, including incarceration costs. So, in conclusion, the evidence given by my opponent was not sufficient enough to prove his claim that capital punishment is the most efficient way to deal with people who are a threat to society. Thank you.
All right. Well, the secondary claims are pretty clearly labeled. Basically, you're arguing that there's insufficiency of proof on those points. That's fine. The signpost on the first point's good. You've got a whole bunch of data that you're going over on execution numbers. There's a claim at one point about maybe there being a risk to other prisoners. I'm not sure that that's something that advances your claim. In fact, it might actually be a better argument for the advocate on their particular position. When you move to the second point, it wasn't clear to me what the value of all the comparative data on the states was. You've got 14 states who don't have the death penalty and never had the death penalty, 4 states who got rid of the death penalty and went along with the court and never tried to rechange it. And so what inference should I draw from this data? It's not clear to me. It's background information, and that's fine, but you're not drawing any inference from it. And I ran into the same problem with the next set of information. You've got a whole bunch of data on the homicide numbers versus the homicide rate. And although the homicide numbers have gone up, the homicide rate has gone down. Okay, so what does that mean, and how is it related to the death penalty or capital punishment? And I don't really get a very clear explanation of that. You had a later argument that talked about the link between the homicide rate and the execution rate, and I thought that that's potentially a good argument, but again, your claim here is not very clearly expressed. The signpost on the third point, when you get to it, that's actually pretty clear. There's, again, an explanation of the number of people who have been exonerated. How does that hurt the advocate's claim? How does it benefit your position? I didn't get a very clear explanation. I did get a good counterclaim, though, that does apply to this point on your point here, and that is the cost issue. So if cost is a measure of efficiency and life imprisonment is cheaper than the death penalty, then you've clearly got a counterclaim here that applies, and that's something that I thought that you did develop to some degree and explain what the relationship was at that point. All right, thank you.